A millionaire invites his black maid's quiet little daughter to play chess one lazy afternoon. He expects a sweet distraction. What he gets instead is a shock to his genius ego. Move after move, the little black girl dismantles him with uncanny precision, leaving him stunned. But the real twist isn't her brilliant mind. It's the secret she unknowingly carries, one that could upend everything he thought he knew about his past. What happens when a simple game reveals a hidden bloodline, buried regrets, and a black child prodigy the world never saw coming? Stay tuned and watch the story unfolds. The morning sun spilled across the windshield as Janelle Carter turned her aging sedan up the winding drive of the Whitfield estate. In the passenger seat, her 8-year-old daughter Lena sat quietly, her small hands clutching a well-worn book of riddles and logic puzzles. The girl was always quiet, always watching, always thinking. Today, though, her wide gray eyes flickered with nervous wonder. The mansion appeared around the final curve, rising like a palace from a storybook. Stone pillars, sprawling gardens, and windows that glinted like diamonds. Lena had seen houses like this in her library books, not in real life. "Stay close to me," Janelle said gently, reaching over to smooth her daughter's braids. "And remember, don't touch anything." "Yes, Mama," Lena whispered, tucking her book in her backpack. The Whitfield estate was even more magnificent inside. Marble floors gleamed beneath Lena's scuffed sneakers. Massive chandeliers floated above their heads, casting soft light across pristine furniture and walls lined with paintings she didn't recognize but felt important. As they entered the main hall, a distant piano melody floated through the air. Janelle led her through a side corridor toward the service entrance, pulling a cart filled with cleaning supplies. She glanced down at Lena, who was still wide-eyed. "I'll be in the West Wing for a while," Janelle said. "Sit here in the kitchen, work on your schoolwork, and be good." Lena nodded and sat quietly at the breakfast nook, but the moment her mother disappeared into the hallway, curiosity tugged at her. She stood, walked down the hall, and wandered past rooms that looked like museums, one filled with glass sculptures, another with antique clocks ticking in perfect unison. She followed the scent of old pages and leather bindings until she stepped into a room that took her breath away. The library was enormous. Books climbed the walls from floor to ceiling. Ladders rolled along the shelves. In the center of the room sat a square table of carved mahogany, and on it rested the most beautiful object Lena had ever seen. A chess set, but not just any chess set. Each piece was made of gold and silver, polished to a mirror shine. The board itself was smooth marble, etched with mother-of-pearl inlay. The pawns looked like soldiers, the knights like charging stallions. Even the queen seemed regal and dangerous at once. Lena stepped closer, forgetting to be cautious. She wasn't touching it, just looking, wondering. Her mind was already working. She remembered the chess basics her third-grade teacher had explained once during indoor recess. How the knight moved in L shapes. How the bishop slid diagonally. How the king must be protected at all costs. "You like chess?" The voice startled her. Lena's shoulders jumped, and she spun around. A man stood near the doorway, tall and dressed in a crisp button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his eyes, also gray, were kind but sharp. Lena's pulse quickened. She didn't need to be told who he was. This was Graham Whitfield, the man her mother worked for. The billionaire. "I'm sorry," she blurted. "I wasn't going to touch it. I was just looking." "It's all right," he said, stepping into the room. "I asked if you liked chess." "I don't know how to play," Lena said, eyes downcast. "My teacher showed us the pieces once, but I've never played a real game." Graham studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the chair opposite the board. "Would you like to learn? Just for fun." Lena hesitated. "Am I allowed? If your mother says it's okay, then yes." "I don't mind." From the hallway, Janelle appeared suddenly, holding a feather duster and looking immediately alarmed. "Lena, I told you not to wander." "She's not in trouble," Graham said calmly. She was curious. "I offered to show her a game." Janelle's eyes flicked between them. "Sir, I really don't want her bothering you." "She's not," he interrupted gently. "If it's okay with you, I'd like to show her a few moves." It'll give me an excuse to take a break. Janelle hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, but just for a little while. Graham gestured to the chair. Sit. I'll start with the basics. Lena eased into the seat, heart thudding. He explained the pieces again, how they moved, what their roles were. But something odd happened. As he spoke, Lena didn't just listen. She saw it all in her head. The game unfolded like a story. When he explained the pawn's first move option, she added, and it attacks diagonally, right? Graham paused. Yes, that's right. Very good. The more he taught, the more she understood, not just the rules, but the why behind them. After a few minutes, he said, Want to try a game? She nodded. He gave her the white pieces. She made her opening move, sent her pawn forward 2 squares. He smiled. Lena didn't win that day. But halfway through the game, she made a sequence of moves that surprised even Graham, nearly trapping his king. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Not just curious now, something deeper, something unsettled. Well, Miss Lena, he said with a smile tugging at his lips, you're full of surprises. And from that moment, the game was no longer just a lesson. It was the beginning of something no one saw coming. The next afternoon, Lena returned to the Whitfield mansion with her backpack tucked under one arm and anticipation gleaming in her eyes. She barely glanced at the dazzling foyer this time. Her focus was elsewhere. As soon as her mother began wiping down the banister in the front hallway, Lena quietly slipped into the library, where Graham Whitfield was already seated, the chessboard reset and ready. Well, look who's right on time, he said, glancing up from a leather-bound book. Ready for a rematch? Lena grinned and nodded, sliding into her chair. The pieces shimmered under the soft light, filtering through the tall windows, and Lena regarded them with the solemn joy of someone meeting old friends. Their second game began, and so did something remarkable. Lena didn't just remember how the pieces moved. She remembered every position from the game they had played the day before. She adjusted, improved. She avoided the traps she'd fallen into, and instead began setting up subtle ones of her own. Graham moved cautiously, sensing something had changed. By the 6th move, she had developed her knights perfectly. By the 10th, she had maneuvered her bishop in a way that made Graham pause. "You've been practicing?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "I think about it at night. I move the pieces in my head." "In your sleep?" She shrugged. "Kinda." They talked to each other. Like a team. Graham chuckled, but a chill ran down his spine. This wasn't just a clever child. This was something else entirely. Over the course of the next week, Lena came back every afternoon. Her mother didn't protest anymore, though she still looked on with quiet concern. Lena's skill grew with dizzying speed. She didn't make the same mistake twice. Her games became fluid, beautiful even, full of layered plans, traps hidden in plain sight, and sequences of moves that hinted at a mind thinking far beyond her years. Graham couldn't keep up. He'd played chess his entire adult life. It was a private retreat, a cerebral exercise he used to sharpen his edge in business. But now, each game left him more unsettled. The child across from him wasn't just improving. She was solving the game in ways he hadn't seen before. He started recording their games. Then one evening, as Lena left with her mother, he sat alone in the library, staring at the board where his queen now sat cornered. For the 3rd time that week, she'd nearly beaten him. That night, he made a call. Dr. Mina Park was one of the most respected minds in competitive chess, an international master, coach of champions, and a woman with zero tolerance for fluff. If anyone could tell him whether this was real, it was her. When she arrived 3 days later, Graham met her in the driveway himself. She was petite, composed, and carried a simple black satchel that might as well have been a surgeon's kit. "Let me guess," she said as they walked toward the house. "You found another gifted child. Just observe. Play with her," Graham replied, "and tell me what you think." Lena sat quietly when introduced, her legs swinging just above the floor, hands folded in her lap. Dr. Park smiled politely and set up the board quickly and confidently. "White or black?" "Doesn't matter," Lena said softly. "You can go first." Dr. Park arched an eyebrow, intrigued. The first few moves were standard: e4, e5. Knights developed. Bishops placed. But by the sixth move, Dr. Park noticed something. Lena wasn't copying openings. She was constructing them. And by the eighth move, Dr. Park furrowed her brow and leaned forward. 10 more moves, and Lena had built pressure on both flanks. Her knights and bishops worked in harmony. Her rook was already positioned for an endgame scenario. Dr. Park found herself in a defensive posture. By move 23, Lena quietly said, "Check." Dr. Park blinked. She hadn't even seen it coming. 5 moves later, it was over. A clean, elegant checkmate. Silence fell over the library. Dr. Park looked at the board, then at Graham, and finally at Lena, who looked confused, as if wondering whether she'd done something wrong. "This girl," Dr. Park said slowly, "is not simply good at chess. She's meant for it. Her mind is seeing the board in layers, like a master-level player. I've trained national champions. I've never seen anything quite like this." Graham didn't speak. He only watched Lena, who sat quietly, her gaze back on the board, already replaying the match in her mind. "She's a prodigy," Dr. Park said finally, "and if this is how she plays at 8, she could be one of the greatest players of her generation." Lena looked up at that, her eyes wide. And Graham just nodded, heart pounding. He had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed changed everything. It started with whispers, subtle at first, like the murmur of leaves before a storm. The girl with the sharp eyes and sharper mind had beaten a master. She dismantled Dr. Mina Park with poise and precision, and by the next week, word had made its way into the city's elite circles. "She's just a maid's daughter," someone said at a charity gala, glass in hand, eyes narrowed. "Yes, but she plays like a machine." "No, she plays like something beyond a machine." Why is Whitfield so invested in her? Those were the murmurs Lena never heard. But even at 8 years old, she felt the shift. She noticed how some of the mansion staff started giving her looks, curious, confused, even cold. And there was something else. The way Mr. Whitfield watched her when she moved a pawn, the way he smiled when she executed a trap, it wasn't just pride. It was familiarity. She saw it first in the mirror, standing on her tiptoes to wash her hands in the kitchen sink. Gray eyes. Her mother had brown ones, deep, soft, steady. But hers were steel gray, flecked with the faintest shade of green. Just like his. "Mom," she asked that night while drying the dinner plates, "do I look like anyone you know?" Janelle froze mid-dry. The towel paused against the plate. "I've heard people say I look like someone," Lena continued. "But they don't say who." And today, Mr. Whitfield looked at me funny. Not mean, just like he knew me. Janelle forced a smile and handed Lena the plate. "You look like you, baby. That's all that matters." But Lena didn't buy it. Not fully. Later that evening, long after her mother had gone to bed, Lena climbed down from her bunk and tiptoed into the hallway. The old shoebox on the top shelf of Janelle's closet had always been off limits. But tonight, she needed answers. She found it easily, tucked beneath a stack of sweaters, the cardboard fraying at the corners. Inside were photographs, envelopes, faded notes, childhood memories. Then her fingers landed on it. A photo. Her mother, younger and radiant, laughing beside a tall man with thick dark hair and unmistakable gray eyes. His arm was around her shoulder. They stood in front of a fountain. She was smiling. He was smiling. And Lena's heart thudded. She stared at the man's face, flipping it over in her hand. In faded ink on the back, G&J, Summer at the Vineyard. The G, she knew now, stood for Graham. The door creaked. Janelle stood in the hallway, bathrobe pulled tight, her eyes instantly locking onto the photo in Lena's hand. The two stood in silence for a moment. Mother and daughter, truth suspended in the air like a held breath. "Is it him?" Lena asked. "Is Mr. Whitfield my dad?" Janelle stepped forward slowly, kneeling in front of her daughter. Her voice was soft, brittle. "Yes, baby." Lena didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She just held the photo tighter, her mind trying to fit this new truth into all the old pieces. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared," Janelle whispered. "Back then, we were from 2 different worlds. I was his assistant. People already talked. When I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to protect you from judgment, from being treated like some secret, from living in someone else's shadow. But he never knew." Lena's voice was quiet but steady. "No," Janelle said, her voice breaking. "I walked away before I told him. I didn't know if he'd accept us or feel ashamed. I made the choice I thought was safest." Lena looked down at the photo again, her thoughts spinning like chess pieces on a board. "All this time," she said slowly, "he didn't know I was his. But he saw something in me anyway. He believed in me." Janelle brushed Lena's cheek. "He saw your brilliance, just like I did." Lena nodded, her breath shallow but calm. I want to keep playing chess with him." "You can. Not because he's my dad," Lena added, looking up. "Because he's someone who saw me before he knew me." Janelle felt the tears then, quiet ones, falling as Lena rested her head on her mother's shoulder. In that moment, nothing needed fixing. The truth had found its way into the light, and Lena, wise beyond her years, had already begun to understand what even adults sometimes fail to. The heart knows what it knows, even before the words catch up. Lena Carter still called him Mr. Whitfield. Even after the photo, the late-night talk with her mother, and the truth that settled like dust in a sunbeam, she never called him anything else. Not Dad, not Graham, just Mr. Whitfield, steady and respectful, as though she was still trying to understand what this new piece on her life's chessboard meant. Graham didn't push it. He showed up to their small apartment on the edge of the city with books, flowers for Janelle, and a shy, uncertain energy that didn't suit his billionaire persona. In those quiet visits, he listened more than he spoke. He watched Lena solve puzzles with frightening speed, listened as she narrated strategies out loud, her brain already 6 moves ahead, and helped her log games into her little leather notebook. He marveled at her calm, her confidence, and the deep well of kindness she carried without ever showing off. Together, the three of them began to form something fragile and real. On weekends, they visited the park. Graham brought portable boards, and Lena played with strangers, smiling modestly each time she won. Janelle watched from nearby benches, her eyes flickering between wonder and caution, still guarding the little girl who had always been her entire world. Then came the tournament. It was the State Junior Grandmasters Invitational, an elite gathering of the region's best young minds. Some were 12, some 15, even a few 16-year-olds who carried themselves like grown adults. Lena was 8, the youngest by far. She wore a simple blue sweater and black slacks. Her shoes were slightly scuffed. Her chest bag was a second-hand satchel Mr. Whitfield had gifted her, lined with velvet, and carrying her personal gold and silver pieces, an echo of the set she'd first touched in his library. The hall was packed. Parents hovered anxiously behind ropes, coaches murmured advice, and cameras clicked every few seconds. When Lena took her seat for the first round, a few people raised eyebrows. A child? In this event? But then the clocks started ticking, and Lena became a storm in silence. She dismantled her first opponent in 21 moves. Her second game ended in 28. By the third match, spectators had begun to gather behind her board, whispering as they watched this small, brown-skinned girl calmly dismantle her opponents with elegance and terrifying foresight. Graham stood to the side, his hands clasped tightly. Janelle didn't sit at all. She paced. Each win brought Lena closer to the finals. Her opponent, there was a 16-year-old boy with national trophies and a reputation for psychological warfare on the board. He tried on Lena, fidgeting, smirking, tapping his fingers as she studied the board. She didn't flinch. Not once. Mid-game, she sacrificed her queen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But Lena didn't blink. 3 moves later, the sacrifice revealed its purpose. Her rook swept across the board with the force of a storm front. In 6 more precise, surgical maneuvers, she cornered the king. Checkmate. The crowd erupted in stunned applause. The tournament director stepped forward, eyes wide, and handed her the winner's plaque. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "Lena Carter, at 8 years old, is now the youngest player to win this title in the tournament's history." As flashes popped and microphones hovered, Lena clutched her plaque and stood behind the podium, blinking at the sea of faces. Then someone handed her a check, a sizable one. Lena looked down at the number, then up at Graham, who nodded gently, letting her decide. She turned to the announcer and leaned toward the mic. "Can we use the money to buy chess sets?" she asked. "For kids who want to play but can't afford them." The room fell silent for a beat. Then cheers broke out again, louder this time. Real, thunderous applause. Even a few tears. In the crowd, Graham exhaled, a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Beside him, Janelle brushed a tear from her cheek. She didn't speak, but when Graham reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. Back on stage, Lena turned away from the crowd, her eyes landing on the two people who had become her center. She still called him Mr. Whitfield, but in her heart, she had already made space for the man who had once unknowingly taught his own daughter how to think like a queen. And today, she proved to the world that she already was one. The morning after her tournament win, Lena's world changed. Not in the slow, subtle way that growth usually comes, but like a camera flash in a dark room. Blinding, sudden, everywhere. Her photo graced news sites and morning talk shows. 8-year-old chess prodigy defeats national champion, one headline screamed. Reporters left voicemails. Journalists emailed Janelle with polite urgency. Lena received her first invitation to appear on a network television special before she even had her cereal. But while the world leaned in, hungry for sound bites and sponsorship deals, Lena was in the kitchen stacking toast into a checkerboard pattern and humming a song she'd made up on the way to the bathroom. She was still 8, still a child with scuffed sneakers and a gap-toothed smile who loved both strategy and swing sets. Janelle sat down with Graham in the quiet of the library later that week. The offers were laid out on the coffee table. Endorsements from chess brands, a scholarship from a top-tier academy, a publishing deal for a children's book about Lena's rise. Graham flipped through them with steady hands, but it was Janelle who made the final call. "We're not chasing all this," she said. "She's brilliant, yes, but she's still a little girl. She deserves a recess and scraped knees. She deserves to be 8. Graham nodded. "We'll do it your way." So they did. Lena went back to regular school the following week. No fanfare, no announcements. She sat quietly at her desk, coloring in the margin of a worksheet before raising her hand to ask if she could start a chess club. Permission was granted. Posters were made. The first week, only 3 kids showed up, 2 curious second graders and 1 fifth-grade boy who only joined because his friend did. Lena didn't mind. She brought juice boxes and let them pick their chess colors. She showed them how to protect their kings with knights, how to castle early, and how to smile even when they lost. Word spread fast. By the 3rd week, 12 kids came. Then 20. Graham came by one afternoon with a delivery, 10 new boards and a hand-carved demonstration set with polished wooden pieces. Lena beamed. Later, as they sat under a tree on the school lawn, just the two of them, she looked up from sketching a rook in her notebook and said, "You don't make me great at chess, I do, but you made me believe I could be." Graham blinked, the words catching him off guard. For a moment, he didn't know what to say, so he just placed a hand gently on her shoulder and smiled. At home, things were different, too. Graham had offered Janelle her old job back, not as a housekeeper this time, but as his executive assistant. She'd accepted under one condition. "We do this as equals now." He agreed without hesitation. They worked side by side in his home office, coordinating community initiatives and chess outreach programs. Janelle's confidence, which had always been solid in private, now bloomed in public. She belonged there, not just as a mother or former flame, but as a sharp, respected mind in her own right. Evenings were quieter. Lena practiced her piano with the same dedication she brought to the chessboard. Sometimes, Janelle would hum softly from the kitchen while Graham sat nearby, reading or playing a silent game of chess in his head. Life didn't become perfect, but it became real. There were still moments of awkwardness, like when Lena's classmates whispered about the articles they'd read, or when Janelle hesitated before knocking on Graham's office door, unsure of the lines they were still learning to redraw. But with each new day, the cracks between past and present filled with a little more warmth, a little more trust. Lena continued to rise, not just in chess, but in the quiet power of knowing herself. And in that knowing, she made room for others. She spent her lunch breaks teaching strategy, to kids who had never seen a chessboard before. She donated her tournament earnings to start chess libraries in schools without them. When asked in an interview what her greatest achievement was, she didn't mention the trophy or the press. She said, "Helping my friends learn. That's the best part." And with that, Lena Carter, child genius, chess prodigy, and daughter of a mother who never stopped believing, carve a space in the world not with noise or fame, but with the gentle brilliance of a mind that never needed to be told it was enough. The day the reigning world chess champion visited Lena's school was anything but ordinary. Cameras followed him down the halls, and the principal practically floated with pride. But Lena sat cross-legged on the library carpet, surrounded by her chess club, explaining the power of a passed pawn to a kindergartner. When the champion finally sat across from her, grinning, skeptical, intrigued, he found himself in the match of his life. Not because she beat him, but because of the grace and clarity with which she played. Mid-game, he paused, leaned back, and smiled. "You've got it," he said. "The rare kind of genius that doesn't need to prove itself." Then, softly, almost fatherly, "But remember, keep playing for joy, not pressure." Lena nodded. She understood. Back at home, life moved with quiet purpose. Graham, now fully a father in presence and affection, no longer walked the mansion like a ghost of wealth. He laughed more, asked questions, listened. Janelle, strong and centered, met him halfway, raising not just a daughter, but a bridge between past regrets and present healing. Evenings became sacred. They called it family chess, a nightly ritual where all three huddled around a board, solving strategy puzzles together. No trophies, no tensión, just soft chuckles, playful arguments over moves, and Lena explaining an advanced gambit like it was a bedtime story. At school, her chess club grew louder, not quieter. Laughter, shouts of check, and cheers when someone finally beat her. She taught without ego, encouraging every child to believe they could see the board clearly, too. In this patchwork of school halls and kitchen tables, interviews and quiet forgiveness, Lena found her rhythm, not in being the smartest person in the room, but in making space for others to shine. And as another puzzle clicked into place one evening, Lena looked up from a board. Her voice was calm, her eyes bright. "Sometimes," she said, glancing at her mom and dad on either side, "the greatest moves aren't played on a board. They're made with love." If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.